Well, there you have another episode of Straight Outta Combat Radio. This Army veteran, 23-year Army veteran, is a transformation coach. He is an HR extraordinaire. He speaks the truth, has a great story about transition, and his wisdom and the points that he makes at the end of this interview are just really spot on. Very humbled and honored to have Kirby Ingles on this episode today. And thank you for listening to Straight Outta Combat Radio.
You're a steely-eyed killer shadow in the night. You were born to fight. You gotta light 'em up.
My name is John Krotek, and I want to welcome you to Straight Outta Combat Radio, audio medicine by GreenZone Hero. We're here to honor the wisdom of America's most valuable asset for combat veterans. We're authentic, we're empowering, we're American.
Save us all before they burn it down.
Our guest for this episode of Straight Outta Combat Radio, audio medicine by GreenZone Hero, is Army veteran Kirby Ingles. Kirby is a 23-year veteran who now lives in central Missouri with his wife and 4 children. Kirby is a leadership and transformation coach working with young professionals, transitioning veterans, and emerging leaders. His diehard passion is helping fatherless men live a more fulfilled life and to become pillars of their communities. His focus to bring positive light to the strengths of the men he works with. That's exactly what he wants to do, is bring positive light instead of all this negativity so that they can become leaders who change the world. And Kirby's been doing one heck of a job. I just want to welcome him to Straight Outta Combat Radio. We've been trying to make this happen for a couple of months now, and it looks like we finally did it. So welcome to the show, Kirby.
Hey, John, thank you for having me on your show. I appreciate, being here, and it's a heck of an opportunity that you're providing other veterans to be here.
Well, thanks for that. And, you had a 23-year career. Before we get to the career and the things that you're currently doing to help people, tell me a little bit about the Ingles household. Who were your mentors? What did you wake up thinking every day as a young child? I mean, did you know you were going in the military? Did you have people in the military in your background? Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's a good question because my grandparents were the sole reason I came in the military. My grandfather was a huge advocate of it. And the most prominent statement I'll start with is that he told me when I asked him, I was like, what did you, and it was years after I had joined the military. And the reason why I stayed for so long and as long as I did, I asked him, and it was close near to the end of his life. And I was like, what is the one thing that you regretted the most? And he was like, I didn't stay in the military. So he was in the Navy and he got out of it for 4 years. He was on a command ship. So he had to do a lot of drill and ceremony and a lot of pompous stuff, and he just got tired of it. He was tired of cleaning the deck. He was tired of this. He was tired of that. He wanted to do what a Navy sailor did, a fight in combat, and things like that. And he was doing a lot of the dress rehearsal stuff, trying to impress, people that were coming on the ship, arrivals and ceremonies and things like that. And he's like, he goes, I went to the recruiter and I asked him, I was like, well, what are my options? And the guy said, you can re-enlist and stay on the ship. And he was like, I don't want to stay on the ship. He goes, you could put me on any other ship in the fleet. I don't care which ship it is. He's like, I just want off of the command ship. And the guy was like, I'm not going to let you off the ship. And so he's like, I got out. And he's like, I don't regret marrying your grandmother, and I don't regret any of the things that happened after that. He's just like, I realized after that there's a lot of camaraderie, there's a lot of friendship, and there was a lot of things that I enjoyed in the Navy that I wish I would have stayed in longer.
Yeah. And
he goes, I really do miss it. He's like, so when you come down to thinking about it, when you retire from the military or you get out, he's like, remember, like, what are the things that you value? And if you value that, you should probably stay in. And if you don't, you should probably get out. And so, leading into that, since I was like 12, 14 years old, my grandparents were talking to me about the military because they knew that was my only way out of small town USA and to have an opportunity to live a life that I would never get to live if I didn't get out of town. You see, the town I grew up in was about 6,000 to 7,000 people. And when I was growing up, by the time I hit junior high and high school, the factories were closing down. The brake factory, the glass factory that made Canadian Club right? And we all know what Canadian Club is. But Canadian Club bottles, they blew the glass, they made the bottles, they shipped them north, filled them, and they shipped them back to the United States.
Yeah.
It was closing down because of logistics. Like the logistics were going to crap in the United States at the point in time. And I was a kid in Illinois in a farm town. There was no opportunity. If I wanted to work on a farm, I was going to work at minimum wage at $4.25. I didn't have medical care. I didn't have dental. I was still going to mom's house every night for dinner. That was it. So the Army was the opportunity that I had, the escape.
Wow, that's awesome, man. So you went in right after you got out of high school?
Well, I joined when I was junior in high school. So I listened to a slick recruiter, very good guy. Older guy, his name was Huckabee. I don't remember his first name, but he told me, the National Guard came to town and they were like, hey, we're going to have this meeting. Come join us. And I joined them. And he looked at me and said, hey, I know you're going to join the Army. He goes, I already can tell by looking at you. You're going to do it. And I don't know how he could tell, but he could tell. He's like, I'm going to tell you what. He goes, you need to join the National Guard now. Let's go to basic training in your junior year of high school. Let's go to AIT your senior year. And if you really want to go active duty after that, if you really want more, then go active duty. It's just a small, signature. It's a document. All we got to do is sign it and you're gone. But let's do it part-time. This is what we're going to offer you. Let's try it out. I mean, what do you say? It's like 6 years, 8 years, part-time, 1 weekend out of the month. It'll pay your car insurance for you. What do you say? And I was like, hey, sounds like a good deal to me. And so when I joined, I eventually got to the point, about 6 months out of high school, I was tired of working on the farm and grinding and working in hog poo and, doing those types of things. And I was like, I'm going to active duty. I'm done with this. I got to get out of this town. I got to find a better life. And I went. And what I realized a few years later was he was totally right. He set me up for success.
Awesome.
And most people will say my recruiter screwed me, but he set me up for success by going to the National Guard because I spent 2 years in the National Guard. And so I get paid for 2 additional years of service by going on active duty. So if I had 2 years of active duty service, I got paid for 6 years because of the time that I served in the National Guard. So I was already accumulating time the day that I became a National Guard soldier as in the active Army, as far as pay goes. And so if I retire at 23 years, I get paid for 25. If I retire at 26 years, I get paid for 28 because I already accumulated that time. So he was giving me the financial incentive and the financial investment, and I didn't see that as a kid. But he presented it to me in another way that I was like, okay, let me bite this. Let me take this on. And when I realized it later on, that was like the smartest recruiter that I ever met. And he took care of people.
That's awesome, man. What a great example, too. And, and you carried that as you got older. Let me ask you this. So you're in basic training. Was there anything in basic training that stood out to you, based on, your past life before you went in the service? But is there anything that stood out that went, holy cow?
Yeah.
This is the real deal.
Yeah. About 6 weeks in, basic training back then was 8 weeks. It was 1996. I was at Fort Benning, Georgia on Sand Hill. Most people will remember that. I was in an infantry brigade or infantry battalion. It was Delta 258 House of Pain. So you remember the name House of Pain because it was painful. And about 6 weeks in, I was doing my laundry and some guy pulled my stuff out of the washer, and stuck it off to the side. And I came back in because I had left and came back. And I was like, why are my clothes sitting outside the washer wet, not in the dryer? And I looked in there and I saw the name on the name tag, and I confronted the guy, and push come to shove, and he had taken my stuff out because he was in a hurry. And we got in a fist fight, and we started punching it out in the laundry room. In those bays. And then there was happened to be a wooden mallet in there, and he was swinging that, and I was punching him. And I ended up having to go to the hospital and get stitches because we pretty much beat each other to death. And this is basic training. So I had to go get an Article 15. And basically from that point on, the drill sergeant said, You're Sugar Ray, and the other guy's Muhammad Ali, because those are the two biggest fighters at the time. And that's what they called us from then on, and told us that we're going to be battle buddies. And at then, I realized that my differences doesn't matter. And the people that I serve with are more important than my differences, because they're willing to fight for the same ideals that I'm willing to fight for. And having that, even we were both in crap. I mean, we were both getting Article 15s, cleaning toilets for 2 more weeks before we got out of basic training, doing what everybody else was supposed to be doing, but we were doing it. And I realized at that moment, like, okay, we're in this together, and we have to get out of this together. And regardless of our differences or what we got in the fight for, we're in this together. And I really feel like that about America today. Like, we're all in this together. And regardless of what we do, our differences or anything else, we have to forge together. Like, it's an upside down Y, and we find the same path, the converging paths, and move together.
That's an awesome story, man. Thanks for sharing that with one hell of a message, by the way. You got through basic, you made it through basic, you graduated. What was graduation like for you, and who came to that? Do you remember?
Yeah, graduation was pretty lame. It was as lame as it is today, in the COVID-19 experience, because when I graduated basic training, the bombing in Atlanta, or the attempted bombing in Atlanta, had happened in Atlanta, Georgia, for the U.S. Olympics. So what they told us was we were not allowed to graduate with a big ceremony, and we were going to get on a bus instead of getting on a plane in Atlanta and go to Alabama. So it was like a 4 or 5 hour bus ride to Alabama, get on a plane, and fly home. And that was my junior year in high school. So to have a drill sergeant who had just experienced Desert Storm, Desert Shield, just came back from combat, straight out of combat, really. I mean, like, straight out of combat. And they were scaring the hell out of us during that time frame. They were telling us all about it. Like, this is what you got to face. This is what you got to do. Carrying 120-pound rucks, in a combat. And they were just talking about all that stuff. And the oil fields and everything that was going on in Iraq during the initial invasion and during Desert Storm, Desert Shield. Yeah, they were scaring the hell out of us. And they were experienced veterans who were drill sergeants who were training us. And they were pounding the hell out of us. They were preparing us for the future. And when I went to Alabama, I sat on that bus and ran for 4 or 5 hours. And I got on that plane and went home. And I knew my life after that wouldn't be different, or would be different. And then it wasn't until September 11, 2001, right, when I was in Egypt, on the multinational force and observers, that I would actually understand what they were trying to tell me. Because when I went home and turned on the TV in Egypt and flipped on the TV and watched CNN and saw one of the towers burning, and then watched a plane live on TV crash into another tower, that I realized the importance of what they were telling me at the time. And that moment resonated with me for the rest of my life, because I didn't get the traditional basic training and the glory and the fireworks and the smoke and all that other stuff, because I came out of basic training right on the right side of an attempted Olympic bombing in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah, I remember that. And I think, you described the Twin Towers, and it's kind of interesting when you say where you were, because I can remember exactly where I was. And most Americans and anybody else in the world that was old enough at the time to see that knows where they were at. And what a horrific scene. So you're already over in Egypt. Tell us about your first combat deployment.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. It was the best experience I've ever had in my life. It was an important guy, Joshua Harvey. I'll name the guy because he's a mentor of mine. He's still a mentor of mine. He's a CW3 getting ready to retire. I got to Fort Drum, New York, 10th Mountain Division, glorious organization. I mean, a lot of tradition, a lot of love there. I got there, and I had come off of a short tour at a military insurance processing station, and I was supposed to be there for 3 years, and I got cut short by a year because of the civilian to military transition. He looked at me and he said, "Hey, dude, look." He's like, "I know where you came from. I looked your records up. I think you got some potential." He's like, "You got a lot to learn. And I'm going to be frank with you. I'm going to be tough on you." And I was like, "Okay, that's fine." And he said, "In about a year, I'm probably going to move up to the next level, and you're going to have to take over because nobody's going to replace me." And I started to be a student of him, a mentor. And he taught me a lot of things about human resources, about customer service, about taking care of people. Because at the bottom, at the end of the day, it's about taking care of people.
Absolutely,
it's about helping people find a solution to their problems. That's what human resources is. And and a year later, guess what? We were going to Iraq. It was the surge. And we were the second unit that was actually extended to a 12-month to a 15-month deployment right after the Stryker Brigade. I actually remember the Stryker Brigade lining up their vehicles at Camp Stryker, and they were getting ready to go home. And Advon had already left for back to go to Alaska. And these guys were lined up, ready to go. And they told them, like, hey, look, you're not going home. You're being extended. And we already knew. We knew we were going to get extended. And to see the expression on their face to go from one sector to another sector that they had no idea about was hard on them. And that set a whole new precedence and tone in my mind. And I realized at that moment, like when he developed me and he prepared me for this position, I had no idea that the responsibilities that I was going to face. But he was straight and frank with me, and he put me in a position, right? Because right before we deployed, he said, hey, I'm going to the brigade. They're taking me. Like, they're not going to take this other guy because, you know, they don't want him. They don't trust him, but they want me to go in this position, and you're going to take over. And I asked him, I'm like, well, I'm not prepared. I don't feel comfortable. Like, I don't think I've learned enough yet, you know, because I had been out of the game for a little bit. And he said, you're either going to do one of two things. You're going to sink or swim. And that was very firm in my mind, like sink or swim. And so I just put my head down. I grinded. I worked hard. I got up at 5:30 in the morning, and I worked till 9 o'clock at night every day. And I made sure that I took care of every single person that I could. And I made sure that the people that worked for me understood that. Like, you have to take care of people at the end of the day, because that's the thing he's instilled in me. As an HR guy, I know we get a lot of, you know, punches in the mouth and in the gut and stuff because, you know, you're a staff guy. But at the end of the day, we take care of people. And if we don't take care of people, then they can't have the right frame of mind to go into combat. They can't have the right frame of mind to do the job that they need to do because they're worried if, is my spouse getting paid? Are my children being taken care of? Is my promotion on order? Are my record straight for my career? Because in the back of your mind, those things are going on while you're in combat. And you can't focus on closing and destroying the enemy of the United States.
Yeah. You know, it seems like you always had things fall into place, but you had to work for it. So, you know, thinking of, you know, frame of mind, you know, what was did you guys know what you were over there for? How was the morale during the surge?
Our morale was pretty high. We knew what we were doing. We knew that we were going into a place called the Triangle of Death, which was a Al-Qaeda stronghold. And we ended up taking over an old former Russian power plant. And it was a 2-company initiative, which was pretty complicated, but went over very, very successfully without any injury or harm. But before that, it was a very turmoil, challenging place to go. There's one gentleman that I'd like to recognize that his name is Travis Atkins, and he's from North Dakota. He ended up giving his life to save a bunch of soldiers. And initially, we recommended him for the Medal of Honor, but they came back and said that he qualified for the Silver Star. And he had ended up jumping on a suicide bomber and to protect 4 other guys in his truck. Recognized that the guy had a suicide vest on and jumped on him, wrestled him to the ground, and used his body to absorb the impact. I've heard stories after stories, and I won't share them today because they're pretty graphic, but from people that had witnessed what was going on, and then the recovery operations. But, you know, I was very, very happy and very proud to see that his son received his Medal of Honor by President Trump many years later, because the men and the soldiers that were in that unit wouldn't give up. They believed that he had earned the Medal of Honor, and they continued to fight and legislate for his honor and for his family's honor. And eventually the President of the United States had presented the Medal of Honor to Travis Atkins, who had heroically saved, several other people. So
thank you for sharing that story. I know, and as a friend, it's got to be tough with those memories, but it's guys like that exemplify the very spirit of our fighting forces. And, that's why I guess we do what we do. I'm just glad you made it back. How many deployments did you do overall, Kirby?
No, I did 2. So I did one to Egypt, and then I did one to Iraq. And that was over about a course of 23, 24 years or so. So I was very lucky. I was very fortunate not to have to continue to repeat my deployments. I just happened to be in a job where I was needed elsewhere, and the demands were, to serve in other capacities. So,
well, there's no doubt. Don't you certainly did your duty, man. So, one is more than enough for the average human being. Yeah. So, kudos
the heart's
to you.
Still there.
Yeah.
Like today, I would jump up and go serve if I had to. I mean, I literally the heart is still there.
Well, you can hear it in your voice, man. You can tell. Yeah.
Yeah. It's tremendous. I mean, you just don't know how. And I think a lot of that has to do with my time at Arlington Cemetery when I was with the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard, sometimes commonly referred to as escort to the President of the United States, just to honor our fallen and put them to rest in that sacred ground. Just really brings a whole new sense of purpose and service to you that you will never forget. And if you ever forget why you served, you have to go see Arlington Cemetery because and watch a service there. It is so powerful. It is so powerful. If it doesn't bring a man to tears, I wonder what's wrong with him.
And you're so right, man. We did 2 years in a row. We hiked 31 miles overnight from 8 o'clock in the morning till about 10 o'clock the following morning, and stopped at every different statue and famous place in the DC area to commemorate, Extortion 17 and the 31 heroes that were lost. And you know what, Kirby, you're so right, man. When you walk into Arlington Cemetery, there's just something about that place that if it doesn't rankle your soul as an American, there's nothing that will. And you serving there and actually putting people in the ground even more so. But it does remind us why we do what we do and why we have such a phenomenal country, as every single human being that's buried there, but all of the millions of others that are still out there that have served this great country. And wow. Well, thank you for that part of duty. I mean, that's something that a lot of people don't think about, but it's so integral to the whole mission.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that because I didn't want to go there because it's an elite organization, and that's a request that most people get, and I didn't ask to go there. I was voluntold to go there. I was actually handpicked and selected, and I'm not trying to brag or pound myself on the chest, but I got a call one day. And the sergeant major came down and told me, he's like, hey, I got some good news and bad news. He's like, you're leaving. And I'm like, great, because I wanted to go. I was ready for the next adventure. And he's like, the bad news is you're going to the Old Guard. And I was like, why is that bad? I was like, what? He's like, there's a bunch of prima donnas there. And I was like, okay. And it's the top. It's the elite. There's a bunch of headstrong people there. I mean, you got the top 10% of the military service, and they're all hand-selected. And they're not prima donnas. They're just dedicated. They're 100% dedicated to their craft and their service. And people take that the wrong way. But what they do on a daily basis is really sacred. And you can't, it took me about 6 months to drink the Kool-Aid. But once I did, it's changed my entire life. I mean, because you come into those moments when your career, in the military where you're like, am I doing this for the right reasons? Do I want to continue to do this? Do I, is it really worth it? And then when you do some Dover air missions, when you bring the fallen back, from overseas, and you take them off the plane and you bring them into the airport for the loved ones to see them for the last time, and then you put them in the ground, and you work with the U.S. Army drill team and the Presidential Salute Battery, and you do the flags in, the flags out ceremony every year. It really starts to grow on you, and you become more of a patriot and more of a citizen to this country, and you forget about the differences and you focus more on what unites us. And you go in that trajectory. I mean, it can't help but change. Like, I am who I am, but there is just so much that we stand for that is in common than that we are different.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. So, wow, you're the first guy I've ever met in the old guard. I've heard about it and knew a little bit about it, but thanks for describing it and the important mission that you guys had. So let's change gears here just a second. Tell us a little bit about transition and what that was like. Were you prepared for that? And what was it like when you finally did get out? Had you been preparing? Tell us about your transition, Kirby.
Yeah, so I started figuring that out a long time ago. I would say that it resonated with me. I thought about transition a couple times during my career. So there was 2 times distinctly that I thought I was going to get out, and I didn't end up doing it for various reasons. But it was when I met Sergeant Major of the Army Jack Tilley after he retired. He had started a consulting company and came to the old guard to present, whatever he was presenting, but it was his company. And he had hired a bunch of old sergeant majors, and he basically said what resonated with me the most is that the day that you join the military is the day that you start planning on getting out. And what that meant is that every decision that I make from here on out, the day that I join, needs to be geared towards what I'm going to do afterwards. He's like, you need to take advantage of your service. And not that it's in a bad way, but it's in a good way, because at some point in time, whether you do 4 years, 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years, you're going to have an expiration. And then you're going to have the rest of your life to live. And your identity cannot be embedded in the military service. He's like, you're going to have to have a living afterwards. And so he's like, whether it's additional duty or a skill or a school or whatever, pick the things that are going to help serve you after you get out, because you're going to give more back than what's going to give you in return, because that's what we do in the service. You give more than what you take back. And he's like, make the right decisions. And so at about 16 years in service, I started thinking about that. And I don't want to do HR for the rest of my life. I was like, what do I want to do? I ended up landing in this senior advisor position as a consultant to a commander. And I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the personal development and the professional development, the leadership development aspect of it. And I ended up going and getting my master's degree in human services counseling with a focus in leadership coaching. And that's what I'm doing today. But if it wasn't for his words that resonated with me, I wouldn't be in this field. I'd probably be doing some HR job that I just didn't want to do anymore because I'd lost the love for it. But I see the monetary aspect of it, because the HR industry is supposed to grow 10% every year for the next 20 years. I mean, that's the stats, but it's not what I enjoyed doing. Right. And so I had to make a choice.
Well, you made the right choice, because you're back in central Missouri now, right?
Yeah, I'm in South Central Missouri, down here in the Ozarks. The Mark Twain National Force is in my backyard.
That's an awesome place to be. So tell us about how you got into what you're doing. You just gave a brief foundation of it, but tell us about your company that you're currently doing now, and tell us, 1 or 2 of your success stories with somebody that you've taken and been able to help to make them take it to the next step. Because you've learned what I'm getting from you, Kirby, and you're a quick study, man. You listen, you watch, you observe, and then you do what's right. I can tell that. And throughout your whole career, and even when you first got into the Army, it seems like that's how you conducted yourself. Tell us how you're using it in your business today.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you said. I listen, I learn, observe, and I conduct myself. And, that's how I've been conducting business. I watch other people who are successful. You have to pick and choose the wise partners. You can have mentors from a distance, and I do. I have a lot, but I also have a lot of other mentors. I've reached out to people, and not be afraid to reach out. Like, literally, don't be afraid. Just because you don't feel like you're an expert in a particular industry, don't be afraid to reach out to those people that are experts in the industry, because you bring a lot of skills and value to the industry as a veteran. You have a lot of experiences that most people don't have, a lot of realities that most people don't have. And so as I told people, my story, and I say, hey, I'm a veteran, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Like, I connected with a guy that co-authored a book with Stephen Covey and Ken Blanchard, and he mentored me for quite a while and talked to me about, what it takes to be a leadership coach, to start an agency, to be a consultant. And that was very, very powerful, and I was very, very appreciative for what he did. But he cared about veterans and service, and so he did that. And I studied him. And it's you know, just because you've done 20 or 30 years doesn't mean you know everything. You have to take a step back and always take the approach that I'm always learning. You know, I'm always growing. There's new things out there that I can get better at. And that's kind of the approach that I took. Now, a story or two that I've done to help people. So I was working with this lady in LinkedIn. She was which is a social media company out there. And she was a a manager. I'm sorry, not senior manager, but a manager with no direct reports. And she had just come out of a nonprofit career for about 20 years, and she felt out of place. And so I started working with her about 30 days after she joined the company. And she told me, she's like, I just don't feel comfortable here. And so I reminded her of the reasons why she got hired, her strengths and skills, and, you know, why they selected her over countless, hundreds of people that they could have got that job, but they selected her. And so she built some confidence, and she began to have some challenges as far as relationships go within the company. And then eventually, at some point in time, after about 3 or 4 months, her boss was let go. And her boss was her only advocate. They basically fired him for whatever reason. I don't know what the reasons were, but chaos started happening after that. Everybody started taking sides. Everybody started jockeying for positions. You know how it goes in those.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, everybody's like trying to position themselves, you know, and like, but I told her, she was like, I'm ready to quit. She's like, I can't do this anymore. I'm done. Like, it's, you know, the nonprofit world moves so fast because you're constantly asking for money. You're constantly in survival mode. And here in the corporate world, it moves so slow. Decisions are bad. You know, it's not that they're bad, but it takes like 3 or 4 meetings to make a decision. You have to analyze. You have to have meeting after meeting after meeting. I said, hold on a second. I was like, I said, you have an opportunity here. I was like, you know, you're used to chaos, right? And she's like, yeah, I am. I'm like, this is your opportunity. I was like, you have to be the calm in the storm. You have to be the eye of a hurricane. And so she remained calm, and, you know, she basically, you know, was the pillar of her community, which is the community was the department she was working with. And everybody could lean on her. Everybody could come talk to her. Everybody could confide in her. And basically, based off of her behavior and the way she conducted herself as far as leadership presence goes, they selected her to be the next senior manager. And she was basically had 4 or 5 direct reports after that, after coming into the community, you know, within 4 or 5 months. So
that's a great story, you know, and so often sometimes when we've gotten used to doing something for so long, we need that extra kick. And sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit. And that's a great story because she was selected out of all of those people. That's pretty cool story. So is there, like, you know, a couple of tidbits that you can give to anybody out there that is maybe looking for a mentor? You know, what should they be looking for with somebody that might be able to help them with their leadership, Kirby?
Yeah, you just got to look for the attributes that you care about. So I always boil back down to what the military service has always taught me and my family, because my family has a long history of this too, is its values. Like what's important to you? Like, and you're probably attracted to certain people that have certain values, certain attributes. And I would focus on those people so they can help you develop those attributes and those values. And it's you know, you try to become the person that you want to be. You don't try to emulate or become somebody else, but become the person that you want to, but develop those attributes of those people that you admire. Don't mock them or don't copy them, but there's certain aspects of them that you appreciate, and focus on those attributes. And that's the best message that I can present to anybody for any mentor, because that's extremely important. And you have to be upfront and honest with the mentor. If you're going to, like me, I have a lot of mentors from a distance, you know, digital and stuff like that, you know, but the ones that I do interact with, the first thing I always ask clients of mine, you know, members of my coaching programs is like, what is it that you saw in me that you liked, that you wanted? And most of them will say, you know, it was you pushed me outside of my boundaries, or, you know, it was your 24 years of military experience, you know, because I want to make sure that I provide that back to them. If I don't know, I can't give that to them. And so I'm just guessing. So what I'm saying is you have to be very deliberate, and you have to tell them what you seek in them in order to get that return.
Great. Thanks for those tips. So let me ask, what would be a message that you could give to civilians, the civilian world about veterans and especially combat veterans? What would you like them to know?
There's a lot of misclaimers and bias and things like that. There's a lot of challenges with PTSD and things of that nature. And I would say don't focus on that so much, but focus on the skill sets and the attributes. One of the things I've found that was very interesting is that less than 2% of veterans in every organization have somebody in the executive level advocating for them. And, that hurts their upward trajectory. In a time like today, when we're in this COVID experience, this coronavirus, crisis management is so important. And your veterans that have been in this situation day after day after day for 4, 5, 10, 20 years have that experience of crisis management. They're wartime leaders. And they can handle the situations today, and you need people that can handle situations. And veterans, they thrive off of this type of environment, and this is the kind of people that you really want. And they have a lot of leadership attributes. Like most of the people that I work with in the corporate world that have been there for 20 years. Like I got guys that are directors and vice presidents that I work with that when I ask them, like, what is it you're trying to achieve? And they're like, I'm trying to be a C-suite level executive. And when I ask them, like, what do you, why is it you select me? And they're like, because of your military experience. And I ask them why. And they're like, well, because I had a family member that was in the military, and I've come to appreciate the leader development that goes in that process, because it is a process. It's a lifetime process of leader development. And they're like, I cherish that. I appreciate that. And that's why I selected you over everybody else. And so when it comes to selecting people for positions like that, I would ask you to think about that. Like, think about people who have real world experience, like real crisis management experience, like can handle situations that nobody can possibly imagine happening, because these veterans have gone through that. And they've been trained to deal with that and to be able to plow through those problems and come out the other side successful.
Definitely some good viewpoints right there. So let's say I'm a transitioning veteran and I'm in a bad place. What would Kirby Ingles tell them?
Yeah, reach out to your friends, man. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, you have a network of people that have been in your life. A lot of your friends and your peers and your subordinates, even. Like, I have a guy a young man that got out of the Army about 3 years ago, and he went out and went and got his college degree and got an HR job and was working for an HR company. And I could reach out to him and ask him for help, because he's already in that sector. Don't be too prideful. Ask for help. You have to ask for help. Like, reach out to your old commanders. Reach out to your old sergeant majors. You have a network of people that are behind you and want to see you succeed. Just because you chose to leave military service, doesn't mean it has to be hard. It can be really easy, actually, if you want it to be. But you have to reach out and you have to ask for help. There's a lot of guys out there that are willing to help, and you just have to reach out to them. You have to ask. And that's the big thing, is everybody's afraid to ask, because we've been developed with so much pride in our service that it's hard for us to ask for help, because it's been ingrained into us. But it's okay. Ask for help.
Great points. And it is, it's been banged into us, mission accomplishment. You don't want to show any weakness. And I got to tell you, when you do ask for help, it shows your strength. So thanks for pointing that out. Kirby, let me ask you this. What does freedom mean to you?
Freedom means a lot of things to me. That's probably the one thing that's most important to me, is be able to get up and do what I do it without being told to do. Man, it means a lot. It's a really important aspect of what I've basically spent the last 24, 25 years doing, and serving other people. It's being able to express my own personal views, but that freedom comes with a lot of cost too. And that's probably the most important aspect of it, because if I don't utilize my freedoms, then I feel like I'm letting other people down that have given so much of their life for freedom, and they gave everything so that I could have this opportunity, and I cannot let that pass. So if I do, then I've let them down, and that's what it means to me, really.
Well, thank you for that. We've asked that question, 120, 130 times, and we always get a different answer, and there's always a different take, which tells me that freedom, like you said when I asked you the question, means a lot of different things. So thanks for pointing that out. A couple more questions, but this has been awesome. Do you have a personal mantra that you live by every day?
Yeah, stick it out there. Be your true, authentic self. Stick it out there. Just do what you're going to do. Don't be afraid to live the life that you want to live. There are so many times where we let our negative mindset control us, and some people call it being politically correct. But, we wear these filters every day because we want other people to be, happy with what we're doing. We want to impress people. But I would turn that back on yourself and say, what makes you happy? What makes you become alive? Like, be your true, authentic self. Be raw and real in the moment. And I think that you'll really find happiness in that, because we filter everything in our lives. We think about what if so-and-so sees this? What if so-and-so sees that? A great influencer that I saw recently basically said that he was getting ready to put out an email to his list. And the first thought that came to his mind before he hit submit was, what if my friend from high school saw this? And he thought to himself, he's like, what am I thinking about? Like, I've made $10 million already. Like, why do I care what my friend from high school thought? And so we filter a lot of things out in our lives. We're not our true authentic selves. And I just say, do what you want to do, be who you want to be, and push that forward. That's the beauty of freedom in America, that you can do that. So, and you've already fought for that. You've already paid the price for that, so go do it. You've earned it. Be who you want to be.
Definitely a great mantra there. So I'm a transitioning veteran, or I'm an executive looking to brush up on my HR skills. How do I get a hold of Kirby Ingles? Where do I make contact with you?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. You can just, there's only I think that there's only one Kirby Ingles in the world, since it's a pretty unique name. And I don't know why my mother gave me that name, Kirby, but maybe I should ask her one day.
It's got a ring to it, man. It's good.
Yeah, it does. It does. So it's interesting. But Kirby Ingles, I spend most of my time on LinkedIn. But you can always go to kirbyingles.com and visit me there and see all the articles and all the offers and everything else I have there. That's kind of like the home base. But I spend, like I said, a lot of time on LinkedIn. I love to interact with people on LinkedIn. I think it's a great business-to-business platform and a business-to-consumer platform. So it's just a great opportunity there. So, and then you can also email me at kirby@kirbyingles.com.
Well, there you have it, right from Kirby Ingles himself, the only Kirby that I know. And, he's a transformation coach. He's a leadership skills coach, an HR guy. He has, a great trajectory going on right now. And I know that we know that his heart is in the right place. And all I can say, Kirby, is, God bless you, man. I'm glad we finally were able to make the contact and get your story. And I look forward to when we can meet in person. And, I wish you safety and wellness during this time of COVID-19. Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, John. I appreciate you having me on the podcast. And thank you, everybody, for listening in. And, stay safe and keep up, the good fight.
Keep going. Thanks, Kirby. Talk to you soon.
You gotta light 'em up before they burn it down.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Straight Outta Combat Radio, audio medicine from GreenZone Hero. If you liked what you heard, then tell others about us. Like us and download us. And please remember, freedom is not free, and combat veterans are vital assets. They're not broken.